two college radio DJs during the 90s. Hosts Keith and Steve helped expose bands like Nirvana, Pavement, and PJ Harvey. They went to shows, interviewed musicians, and reviewed albums for various zines and papers. They worked security at concerts and once even did loading for fish. Now they're dads. Whether you want to explore lesser-known music or take a trip down memory lane, tune in to the New Dad Rock. Join hosts Keith and Steve as they navigate the ages together, sharing their love of music across various eras and genres. Always well-intentioned, often well-informed, seldom boring, the New Dad Rock will expand your mind. Welcome to the New Dad Rock. I'm Keith.
And I'm Steve.
And this is the first time we're recording on the East Coast together. But we're still not together. We're still a couple hours apart, so I can't see you. You can't see me. We can only hear each other, so it should be fine. It's like riding a bike.
It's just the same as it ever was. Same as it ever was.
Oh, man. Yeah, you know what's different? Our alma mater, Geneseo, where we were radio DJs together, WGSU 89.3. They have a mascot now.
A mascot for the radio station, or like it's just the school mascot?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's for the radio station.
How does a radio... I guess it makes sense. Sports teams can have mascots, so why not the radio station?
Yeah, she's a squirrel. Her name is Jenny, which was the name of the beer, right? Genesee beer, Jenny, the Geneseo River, Jenny, spelled with a G. She's got a pink mohawk, and she wears a WGSU 89.3 sports jersey.
And she definitely identifies as she?
She's been identified as a her.
Okay.
But there's a festival. I think we should go to it.
I'll let you be in charge of going to that.
Wow.
Jenny Fest?
Yeah. An estimated 500 people showed up. That's like almost as big as the first open mic night they had in the ballroom.
Well, look at the picture. It looks like a band is playing like on a roof. Doesn't it look like that?
I think it is a band on a roof. That's awesome. Dude, we got to go back. All right, so I'll look it up. Looks like it's in the springtime. We're going to go back to Geneseo and meet up with Jenny.
No, it's funny. It brings me back. You know, it's almost like we're starting over though, like because you're in a new location. This is a new studio for you.
This is the first place we don't live together, but we live close to each other for the first time since the late 90s.
Yeah, the late 90s when we lived in San Francisco simultaneously.
Totally. When were you there?
I was there from late 98 through mid 02.
Yeah, that sounds right. We went to a bunch of shows, I imagine. I don't have pictures because we didn't have cell phones. But I imagine we went to a lot of shows back then.
Yeah, I mean, I have some of the posters. Remember, like, you go to concerts now and posters are like the big thing and they're like $40 or $50. Like, we used to go to shows at the Fillmore and most concerts, they would just hand you
a nice poster.
A nice poster for free. Yeah, so I have a bunch of those. That's all I have instead of pictures. That and the memory on the stain in my head, on my brain.
Yeah, I more know I went than actually remember. The actual show, I don't remember that way. But
well, it's funny to go back and you look at like Setlist FM and you're like, I know I saw this band. So you like Google the band and the city. You're like, wow, that was 2 years different than when I thought it was.
Oh my God. I was trying to figure out when I first saw Olivia Tremor Control. I know it was at Bottom of the Hill, except that they played Bottom of the Hill 4 times in the same year, like multiple tours. I was like, I don't know which one I was at. I'd like to imagine I was at all of them.
Yeah, Olivia Tremor Control. You know what? We're in episode 60 something now, and I feel like when we came up with the New Dad Rock, whatever the New Dad Rock is, I was pretty sure that Olivia Tremor Control and that whole Elephant Six contingent, which also featured Neutral Milk Hotel and Apples in Stereo and many, many others. I thought that would have been one of the first 10 episodes that we did.
I bet it was in the planning documents when we started. I have no doubt that it was.
It's perfect New Dad Rock material. I think it's not necessarily new. These guys were a flash in the pan in the mid to late 90s, and really only put out 2 albums per band. Olivia Tremor Control and Neutral Milk Hotel we're talking about, and they're a little off the beaten path, but they're really cool and weirdly have a pretty broad audience, I would say, wouldn't you?
Yeah, for sure. What's interesting is Olivia Tremor Control, I thought was bigger at the time, but certainly Neutral Milk Hotel has definitely become more of a legendary band.
That's definitely true. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff Mangum, who's the main guy of Neutral Milk Hotel, was in the original Olivia Tremor Control, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, you can find these online on YouTube. There's a lot of videos that do origin stories or interviews, but they're all like best friends. There's like 5 or 6 of them. They live with each other. They grew up in Rushton, Louisiana, so they knew each other since they were like 10 or 11. They were always in fake bands, making recording projects. At some times, they're living in Athens together. I believe they're living somewhere in Brooklyn together at some point. They lived in Denver at Rob Schneider's place. I think it's Rob. That sounds like a comedian.
It is. It's Robert Schneider, not to be confused with the guy that you know from some
Saturday Night Live. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they lived with him in Denver for a period when they actually recorded some of these albums. I think the Neutral Milk.
And Rob Schneider was the leader of Apples in Stereo and continues to be in Apples in Stereo, which are one of the bigger bands of that group. But yeah, for me, Olivia Tremor Control was the thing. It was, and I think the difference for me was that Olivia Tremor Control has multiple heads, whereas Neutral Milk Hotel was just really Jeff Mangum's band, and Apples in Stereo was really Robert Schneider's band. So Olivia was, Will Cullen Hart and Bill Doss and John Fernandez and Pete Archie. There were a number of people that contributed and wrote songs and sang vocals. So, yeah, that to me was the big band.
Yeah, that's definitely how I got into the Elephant Six Recording Company. I think that's their full name, which is a collective of groups. Recording projects. Like they're recording for each other, and they pass tapes around on 4 tracks. People don't know this, but 4 tracks were like cassette tapes that you could record up to 4 tracks on. They would bounce the music, which means you take tracks 1, 2, and 3, record them in one mix to 4, and that gives you 3 tracks again. So you can continue bouncing tracks. That's how they end up with all these ambient sounds, and that's why it's lo-fi for certain, because they couldn't redo it. Apparently, Jeff Mangum lived with a bunch of them in Athens, and he would sing in the bathroom all his songs. That's how he'd practice. So it was like a very creative environment. Everyone was very supportive. They would do concerts all the time. He would drum with before they were Olivia Tremor Control, he'd drum with them. And even like afterwards, they'd all play together if they were on tour together.
So it was kind of like shared rehearsal spaces. This person writes this song. They get this band together to play it. And every now and then those projects get assembled into a band, Olivia Tremor Control. Another group of songs is another band, Neutral Milk Hotel. There's overlapping musicians within the bands.
Yep.
And, this whole collective became the Elephant Six, which was their recording company, right? But all these bands signed on minor and some major minor record labels.
Yeah. I mean, we might have only heard about them because our friend Brian was at one of those labels, Fly Daddy, in the late 90s, and Olivia Tremor Control was on Fly Daddy.
Right, and Fly Daddy was one of those minor labels, but didn't they have backing from, like, Virgin?
Yeah.
Weren't they, like, major back? But the moral of the story is it was a small label. Our friend worked there, and this was the coolest band on the label, Olivia Tremor Control. Look, when I first heard this, I think it was early 97, I know the album came out, and the album we're talking about is Dusk at Cubist Castle by Olivia Tremor Control. That came out in 96, but I think I heard it at the beginning of 97.
I'm sure I didn't hear it right away either.
It was very cacophonous, the cacophony, but it was pretty psychedelic, like the Beatles, like the White Album, those sound collages built in with a lot of stereophonic sounds, like you were describing before, Keith, with the multiple tracks, creating layers of sound and almost a George Martin wall of sound. But it was really the psychedelic modern music that sounded like it was straight out of the 60s. And, just, it wasn't anything like I was hearing at the time.
Right, and they did that on purpose. In fact, that's might have what held them back from like popular acclaim. Is they'd write these really poppy songs that could be I don't know if this is a bad thing to say, but like Beach Boys songs or Beatles songs, and then they would deteriorate into noise. So they purposely did that, and they'd play live like that. So they'd have a pop song going, and then it would deteriorate into like a noisy instrumental. I wouldn't even call it instrumental, more just improv. I have no idea.
And it's like they're using like glockenspiels and tubas and flutes and multiple organs and of course drums and guitars and keyboards, didgeridoos and other assorted instruments.
I was just going to say, it was one of the first bands where I ever saw all the people change instruments in the middle of songs.
After Olivia Tremor Control had their 2 albums, they eventually evolved and became... Bill Doss left, and he formed his own band.
Sunshine Fix?
Yeah, Sunshine Fix. And so the remaining members, essentially, of Olivia Tremor Control, and I interviewed them back when I was working at Splendid E-Zine.
Nice.
And John Fernandez, who mostly played bass, but played a lot of other things, said what makes them different is, most bands and most rock bands play to the beat of the drum. They were playing more off of a drone for, like... any sort of, sustaining instrument or just one really long note, that they were all playing off of that, basically that hum that they were playing to, rather than a rhythm or a beat. And that's how they were, I think, the improvisation that you were describing.
Yeah, it was more like scoring an imaginary movie. Like, it's not musical. Sometimes it was definitely far out there, especially in this, late 90s. But yeah, it was just different, really different.
And at the same time, there was some very pop adjacent songs. It was like the beginning of dream pop. I mean, some of the more twee bands of the early 2000s, I think, were influenced by some of that sound. I definitely think there might have been like an artist's band. Like, a lot of artists probably liked what they were doing because it was definitely out there. Yeah, and they could have been pretty much on the cusp of getting a lot bigger, but they, put all these sound collages that were like snippets of songs played forwards, backwards, and at different speeds for 30 seconds, and then go into something that was a beautiful song for a minute and a half, and then all of a sudden it deconstructs and the instruments fall away, and then they're back playing off of this drone, and you're like slowly going down a hill into nothingness, to the abyss.
Was Sunshine Fix, that was cleaner, right? That was more song oriented than Olivia Tremor Control?
Yeah. So, like any multi-headed beast, you start to pick out the songs written by which person. And Bill Doss tended to be the guy that was the poppy, Beach Boys,
60s, 70s guitar.
That sort of sound, where Will Cullen's songs were a lot trippier and, tended to be a little bit more wild.
And he
so Sunshine Fix was a lot poppier with more traditional song structures, 12 songs that were 36 minutes or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Brutal. Was Circulatory System the name of Williams' band?
Yeah, the remainers of Olivia Tremor Control, essentially.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that ever caught on. I got the first album. They might have had more. I might have even seen them live at some point. I'd have to...
They've had 2 or 3 more albums, I think. And you're right. It was there... For me, the 2 Olivia Tremor Control albums, Dusk at Cubis Castle and Black Foliage Animation Music, those 2, plus the first Circulatory System album that is self-titled, those 3 albums, to me, are amazing. That's kind of like the high point of the Elephant Six, that whole genre, that whole music. That, to me, is it. And, there's some personal reasons, like, I was getting into that album, like, right around the time I met Kristen. So, it plays a part, and there are emotions there. So,
that's cool.
So that plays a part.
It's so funny, I guess. I actually, one of the first... I met Chrissy in 2000, and then went to her birthday party, and I brought her a gift. It was 2 albums. One was Modest Mouse, Building Something Out of Nothing, which was kind of like a B-sides collection, and the other one was the second Neutral Milk Hotel album. in the Airplane Over the Sea.
It's Jeff Mangum's band. And he is really a singer-songwriter. He's really bearing his soul out there. He has the 2 albums, On Avery Island, which I think is fantastic. That's when I started listening to them.
Yeah.
I think In the Airplane Over the Sea hadn't come out yet. And that one took me a while to digest. And I know that is probably, your favorite album of this whole genre. I think even Darren asked us if In the Airplane Over the Sea was on our logo, and it's not. Olivia Tremor Control is. Dusk at Cubist Castle.
Yep.
That must tell you something about me. But these are 2 all-time classic albums. I mean, In the Airplane Over the Sea, the whole... Is it a story? Is it a medley? Is it what is it? Just a treatise on Anne Frank and the ghost of Anne Frank haunting him, through the decades?
He just happened to be reading Anne Frank at that time, and he worked it in. But what's interesting is how he would actually practice or write his songs. Like, he literally lived with his friends. Apparently, he would just play hours a day. He would walk around with his guitar and, play his songs. They become so part of his muscular body and, the physicality and the emotionality. They're just who he is. In fact, I just wonder if, after putting that out as a second album, he doesn't have another album. I think he has one more song written afterwards.
He's basically 2 albums, On Avery Island and The Airplane Over the Sea. And he's got a few stray singles, like you said. Yeah, he's basically a musical genius who made his magnum opus, and then he put down his pen. And I think by him not putting anything else out there, it could be he's afraid to, or he doesn't have the confidence in it, or he just, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's an artistic statement. But I remember I saw the Olivia Tremor Control came back reunited in 2005, I believe.
Uh-huh.
And I saw them in New York with Brian, as we've mentioned a few times. And Jeff Mangum came out and he sang 1 or 2 songs with them, and the crowd just went crazy. He was at the Occupy Wall Street things, and people made a big deal that he was there. It was like a sighting, and he was playing it in public, and
Yeah, he definitely has a fanatical fan base, which could also be part of the challenge for him. Being kind of a introvert. I do wonder. I did see him, I think, a couple times at the Fox Theater in Oakland in the 2010s. I believe I saw him twice there, 5 years apart. He would do small tours. I mean, he's going to play the songs because he doesn't have other songs.
But those 2 albums, I mean, Garden Head, Leave Me Alone, which is on Avery Island, is probably my favorite song by them.
I agree with you.
And I can sing every word to that at any time.
Okay. Anyway, so for whatever reason, Olivia Tremor Control was the bigger band in the present, but Neutral Milk Hotel, according to...
has the enduring legacy.
I wonder if he's like the Nick Drake of his era. It's possible that In the Airplane Over the Sea would be in my top 10 desert islands. Though
nice.
I would actually prefer both albums. Because I love Garden Head so much.
Yeah.
If it was a double...
I would 100% have Olivia Tremor Control Dusk at Cubist Castle. Soundtrack to the unrealized film script Dusk at Cubist Castle.
Oh, Steve. Go to YouTube, look up the unrealized film script of that movie. Apparently, there's been a crowd-funded documentary on Olivia Tremor Control that started a year or 2 ago, and it's not out, but they have... but they might have only created the trailer for it. But there is... theoretically, a documentary coming out on Olivia Tremor Control. Yeah.
I remember for years hearing about the Flaming Lips were going to do Christmas on Mars. They were going to make this amazing movie. And you know what? They ultimately made that movie, and I watched some of it. It was one of the worst things I ever saw.
I believe you. Oh, my.
So I don't have a lot of high hopes for this project that you're mentioning, but, it's there.
You know what's interesting?
We report, you decide.
Totally. This is what's interesting about these bands is there's definitely their peak creativity or their peak output was literally 97, 98 or 96, 99. It's in there.
Yeah.
It's definitely an era. It's like a snapshot, like a half decade. It's 5 years of a particular.
Well, if you think about it, the music that a lot of it was inspired by, that psychedelic singer-songwriter and psychedelic rock and music from the 60s, that was what, 66 to 69 itself. It was
a good point.
A 30-year cycle or a 25-year cycle, and it was in for a couple of years and it's gone. I mean, when we think about that era of Jimi Hendrix, for example, 3 albums and you know, a lot of B-sides that have been put into compilation albums, but again, over a 5-year period. So these guys were taking more of the tack. You know, now if you're a successful band, you're a legacy act. I mean, we look at bands like Ween, like they're, you know, pushing 40 years old as a band. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, kudos to them. And, you know, it's not a unique thing to be out there, you know, have an amazing career for 5 years and then recede into the background. I mean, sounds like perfect definition of a cult act. For relatively unknown bands, I think these 2 bands are surprisingly big, or should be big. And, you know, we talk about that a lot on the New Dad Rock. These bands should be bigger.
All right, we don't do this often, but it is back to school time. We're going to give our audience homework. We want you to listen to Gardenhead by Neutral Milk Hotel. It's a single song off their first album. And we'd like you to listen to the first Olivia Tremor Control. There is one other Olivia Tremor Control album, I think. It's kind of like a singles collection.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it's important because I love California Demise, and that's on it. Yeah. But that's pretty good, too. I'm going to have to check out Circulatory System again.
Excellent, and thank you for listening to yet another ramble of the New Dad Rock.
The ramble.
Ramble on! We better edit that out. That's going to cost us money. We can't afford Led Zeppelin. Thanks for coming along on the journey. Thank you for being there.